All right, if you're a ship owner or you're operating a modern dynamic positioning vessel, then you're in the right place. We're about to dive deep into something called the DP FMEA. Think of it as the single most critical safety analysis for your vessel. It's really the bedrock of its safety. So let's jump right in. You know, these modern DP vessels are incredibly complex machines, right? And with all that amazing technology comes risk. It's not enough to just cross our fingers and assume everything's safe. We actually have to prove it. And that right there is the whole point of a failure modes and effects analysis, or FMEA for short. It's all about finding the gremlins in the system before they cause a real problem out at sea.
So what is a DP FMEA really? Well, you can think of it as a super detailed, systematic investigation. We're literally going on a hunt for any, and I mean any, single point of failure. That could be one tiny switch, a single bad cable, maybe even a bug in the software that could make the vessel lose its position. Getting this right sets the safety benchmark for the entire operational life of the ship. It's that important.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with the why, the core mission and objectives. Then we'll get into the how with the FME process playbook. After that, we'll cover the what, the evidence and deliverables you'll need. And we'll wrap up with the rules, the key standards and compliance you gotta follow.
All right, Section 1, the core mission. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the process, it's absolutely crucial to know what we're aiming for. You know, what does a successful FMEA even look like? So yeah, what are we really hunting for? This isn't just some paperwork exercise or a box-ticking thing. Not at all. We are actively trying to uncover those hidden weaknesses, the vulnerabilities that could lead to a major incident down the line.
Okay, let's break down the main goals here. First, and most importantly, we're identifying any single point failure. That's the Achilles heel of the system. We're also digging for what are called common mode failures. That's where one single issue can have a domino effect and knock out a bunch of systems at once. Then, we have to prove that the backup systems, the redundancy, actually works as advertised. It's no good having a spare if it doesn't kick in, right? We're also looking for tricky hidden failures that might not be obvious until another system fails. And a really big one, the final report has to be written so clearly that it can be used for operator training.
And that really brings up a super important point. The FMEA has to do two jobs at once. On one hand, it needs to be technically solid enough to satisfy all the classification societies and regulators, all the official bodies. But on the other hand, it has to be a practical, useful guide for the crew who operate the vessel every single day. This thing is meant to be a living tool, not some dusty report sitting on a shelf.
Okay, moving on to the playbook. We've talked about why we do this, so now let's get practical and break down how it's done. The step-by-step process for a really solid FMEA. So this whole thing really boils down to 4 key steps. Step 1 is the homework phase, study and risk analysis. This is where the team just immerses themselves in the vessel's systems, going through every drawing, every manual, trying to spot potential problems on paper. Then comes step 2, the proving trials. This is where the rubber meets the road. You take all those theories and you test them on the actual vessel to see what happens. Step 3 is all about taking action. You find a problem, you suggest a fix, and you make sure it gets done. And finally, step 4, the final report. This is where you package everything up, all the findings, the trial results, the corrections, into one comprehensive document.
Now, during those sea trials, there's a really critical test that has to happen, and it's all about power management. The FMEA has to prove the vessel can handle failures in 2 different power setups, open bus and closed bus. Think of it like this. Open bus is like having 2 separate independent power grids. If one goes down, the other keeps running. It's simple and safe. Closed bus ties them together for better efficiency, but it's also more complex. A failure in one part could potentially affect the whole system. The FMEA has to prove the vessel is safe in both of these modes, no exceptions.
So who's actually doing all this heavy lifting? Well, it's a team effort. And frankly, your FMEA is only as good as the people who write it. This isn't a job for just one person. As the vessel owner, it's on you to sign off on a team of real experts. We're talking a mix of disciplines. You absolutely need a marine or mechanical engineer, an electrical engineer, and a control systems engineer, plus a team leader to pull it all together. You can't cut corners here.
All right, next up, the evidence. Look, you can do the best analysis in the world, but if it's not documented properly, it doesn't count. So let's talk about the paper trail, what you need to produce to prove you've done the job right.
This is basically your checklist of everything you need to hand over.
For planning, you'll need timetables and progress reports. The FMEA report itself will have things like block diagrams and detailed write-ups. Then there's the trials plan, which includes the procedures you followed, and of course, the results. And it all comes together in the final docs, the complete FMEA report, and even a preliminary document for the annual trials that will come later. Now listen up, because this is probably the most important takeaway for any ship owner. The very first thing in that final report has to be an executive summary. And in that summary, it needs to state in plain English what the vessel's worst-case failure is. No jargon, no ambiguity. This is the bottom line, the one thing you absolutely need to know from this whole entire process.
Okay, last section, the rulebook. It's important to remember that this FMEA stuff isn't just a good idea, it's a requirement. There's a whole set of international standards and rules you have to follow.
And here are the big players. Your FMEA absolutely has to be in line with standards from groups like the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, the International Marine Contractors Association, IMCA, and of course, your classification society, whether that's ABS, DNV, or another. Again, this is not optional. It's a requirement to operate.
I love this quote from the official guidance because it perfectly captures the spirit of the FMEA. It says the report should be seen as a living, working document. What does that mean? It means you don't just do it once and stick it in a drawer. Anytime you modify a system, anytime you upgrade software, or even if a near miss teaches you something new, you have to go back and update the FMEA. It's designed to evolve with the vessel over its entire life.
When you boil it all down, the DPFMEA is what turns the idea of safety into a documented, proven fact. It's the concrete evidence of your commitment to keeping your crew and your assets safe. So I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. When it comes to your vessel's safety, is it something you can prove, or is it just something you assume?